Sand swirled across the ancient marketplace as the auctioneer's voice cut through the desert heat. Amidst the clamor of wealthy merchants and royal emissaries, a young slave named Farid stood trembling on the wooden platform. His fate seemed sealed until chaos erupted when an enormous camel, taller than any beast in the caravan, broke free from its handlers and charged directly toward him. In the confusion that followed, something inexplicable happened. The massive creature knelt before Farid, creating a moment that silenced the entire marketplace. The crowd's murmurs faded as Farid stood frozen, his eyes locked with those of the massive camel. For 18 years he had lived as property, passed between cruel masters in the sprawling desert city of Marrakesh. Today was supposed to be another transaction, until this beast changed everything. "Get back, slave," the auctioneer's whip cracked near Farid's ear. Someone control this animal, but the camel remained unnaturally still, kneeling before Farid as if in reverence. Its eyes, amber pools flecked with gold, held an intelligence that sent shivers down his spine. A bad omen. Someone shouted from the crowd. Qassam, Farid's current master and one of Marrakesh's wealthiest spice merchants, pushed through the throng. His jeweled fingers gripped Farid's shoulder painfully. "You've brought shame upon my household with this spectacle," he hissed. "No one will buy damaged goods now." The auction dissolved into chaos. By sunset, Farid found himself still in Qassam's possession, along with the unwanted camel that no one else would purchase after the incident. "You'll sleep with the beast in the outer courtyard," Qassam spat, shoving Farid toward the camel pen. "Tomorrow I'll decide what to do with both of you." Moonlight spilled over the courtyard walls as Farid settled beside the enormous camel. Unlike the other beasts that grunted and shifted restlessly, this one watched him with eerie calm. "What am I to do with you?" Farid whispered, reaching out hesitantly to touch the creature's coarse fur. "You've only made my life more difficult." The camel lowered its head, nudging Farid's chest with surprising gentleness. Then it turned its neck, revealing a marking on its shoulder that made Farid gasp. A crescent-shaped birthmark, identical to the one hidden beneath Farid's own garments. With trembling fingers, Farid traced the mark, remembering how his previous masters had called it a demon's touch. He had learned to keep it hidden to avoid beatings, yet here it was, mirrored on this extraordinary creature. "Impossible," he breathed. The camel made a low sound, almost like a purr, and settled beside him. Despite the cool night air, warmth radiated from the beast. Sleep came unexpectedly easy that night. In his dreams, Farid saw endless dunes beneath a sky scattered with unfamiliar stars. A voice called to him, not in words, but in feelings and images that spoke of ancient power and distant mountains. Dawn broke with the sound of water splashing. Farid awoke to find the camel had somehow managed to pull the rope of the courtyard well, drawing up a bucket of fresh water that now sat before him. "You're no ordinary beast, are you?" Farid said, cupping his hands to drink. The camel blinked slowly, its posture almost proud. "You need a name," Farid decided, remembering tales from his childhood before slavery. "Jabbar, the mighty one. That suits you." Jabbar nodded, as if in agreement, and Farid couldn't suppress a startled laugh. Their moment of peace shattered as Amir, Qasim's head servant, entered the courtyard. The beast pulled water from the well, Amir muttered, eyes wide with superstition. "The other servants won't come near it. Or you." "He means no harm," Farid said. "Harm or not, there's talk in the marketplace about prophecies and desert spirits. Master Qasim is displeased." Amir glanced nervously at Jabbar. "He plans to sell the camel to the slaughterhouse and you to the mine operators from the south." Farid's stomach turned to stone. The southern mines were a death sentence. Few slaves survived more than a year in those dark pits. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow. Traders arrive at noon." Amir hesitated, then dropped his voice. "There's more." An elderly merchant recognized the camel at the auction. "He's been asking questions about you both." Mentioned something about the chosen rider. Master Qasim had him thrown out, but he shrugged, leaving the implication hanging. After Amir left, Farid pressed his forehead against Jabbar's warm neck. "What have you brought into my life, mighty one?" he whispered. Jabbar turned his great head, eyes reflecting something that might have been determination, as if to say, "Not what I've brought into your life, but what I'll lead you out of." That night, as the household slept, Farid noticed that Jabbar had somehow loosened the ropes, binding him to the post. The great Cammel knelt, waiting expectantly. An invitation, a chance. Farid looked toward the high walls of the merchant's compound, then to the stars above. For the first time in his life, they seemed to be calling to him. Moonlight cast long shadows across the courtyard as Farid hesitated at this moment of decision. Freedom beckoned, yet fear held him in place. The punishment for escaped slaves was death by stoning. Jabbar nudged him gently, those intelligent eyes seeming to understand his turmoil. "Even if we escape the compound," Farid whispered, "where would we go?" As if in answer, a soft rustling came from beyond the courtyard wall. Farid tensed, expecting guards, but instead, a small package wrapped in cloth sailed over the wall, landing at his feet. Heart pounding, Farid unwrapped it to find a fragment of ancient parchment and a small leather pouch containing dried dates and a waterskin. The parchment showed a faded illustration, a man riding a great camel across desert dunes, both bearing the same crescent mark that Farid and Jabbar shared. Beneath were symbols in a script Farid couldn't read. "Who's there?" he called softly toward the wall. "A friend," came a weathered voice. "One who recognizes the signs. The eastern path leads to the red rocks. Wait there at dawn." Footsteps retreated before Farid could respond. He studied the parchment again, the illustration unmistakable. This was no coincidence. Someone knew what the birthmark meant. Something beyond slave and beast. "What do you think, Jabbar?" Farid whispered. The camel knelt lower, an unmistakable invitation. Decision made, Farid climbed onto the beast's back. With surprising grace, Jabbar rose and moved silently toward the servants' entrance, the only gate left unguarded at night. The wooden bar across the door was heavy, but Farid managed to slide it open. The hinges creaked softly as they slipped into the narrow alleyway beyond. Marrakesh slumbered around them, only distant dog barks and occasional laughter from late-night taverns breaking the silence. Farid guided Jabbar through the labyrinthine streets, staying in shadows, heart hammering with each patrol of city guards they narrowly avoided. Near the eastern gate, they paused behind a row of merchant stalls. The gate stood closed for the night, two guards lounging beside it, sharing a jug of wine. "We'll never get past them," Farid murmured. Jabbar snorted softly, then did something extraordinary. He turned toward a stack of empty clay pots beside a otter's shop and deliberately knocked them over with his massive shoulder. The crash echoed through the quiet streets. The guards jumped to their feet, drawing swords. "Thieves at the potter's shop," Farid called out, disguising his voice. As the guards hurried toward the disturbance, Jabbar bolted for the gate. Using his massive strength, the camel pushed against the wooden doors until a gap appeared, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Beyond lay the open desert, silver blue under moonlight. They rode hard until Marrakesh was just a smudge on the horizon. Near a cluster of red rock formations, Farid finally allowed Jabbar to rest. "Clever beast," he said, patting the camel's neck. "Or are you more than just a beast?" Jabbar's eyes seemed to smile. As dawn approached, painting the desert gold, an old man appeared, riding a small donkey. Farid recognized him from the marketplace, one of the elderly merchants who had gasped at the auction. "You came," the old man said, dismounting with difficulty. "I am Malik. Why did you help us?" Farid asked warily. Malik gestured to the parchment Farid still carried. "That is but a fragment of the prophecy of the desert child. I have studied the ancient texts all my life. His fingers trembled as he touched the crescent birthmark on Jabbar's shoulder. This mark is sacred. It appears once in a generation, always on one human and one camel. Together they are destined to find the lost oasis and restore balance to the desert kingdoms. I'm just a slave, Farid protested. No, Malik said firmly. You are the chosen rider, and this is no ordinary camel, but one of the sacred guardians born of desert magic. Farid shook his head in disbelief. These are children's tales, tales rooted in truth, Malik insisted. Listen well, Qasim has discovered your escape. By midday, his men will follow your trail. But worse still, word has reached the Sultan's ears. He has sought the chosen rider for years, fearing the prophecy that says the rider will end his tyrannical rule. The Sultan? Farid felt dizzy. What have I become entangled in? Your destiny, Malik said simply. He pressed a small leather pouch into Farid's hand. Go east, toward the Crimson Mountains. Seek the nomads of the Banu Sabir tribe. They will shelter you until you are ready. A distant horn sounded from the direction of Marrakesh. They come, Malik said urgently. I will lead them south, while you go east. May the desert spirits guide you. As the old man departed, Farid unfolded the complete parchment fragment. More illustrations showed the rider and camel finding a hidden paradise amid barren dunes, bringing water to the desert. Is this true, Jabbar? He whispered. Are we part of something greater? The camel's eyes held no doubt, only certainty. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. With one last look toward Marrakesh, Farid turned Jabbar eastward, toward the distant mountains and an uncertain future. The eastern horizon blazed orange as Farid and Jabbar pressed deeper into the desert. Behind them, dust clouds marked the pursuit. Qasim's men had not been fooled by Malik's diversion for long. Faster, Jabbar, Farid urged, though he worried about pushing the camel too hard under the strengthening sun. To his amazement, Jabbar increased his pace without apparent strain. The massive beast moved with the grace of a desert wind, his powerful legs eating up the distance as though born to outrun the swiftest horses. By midday, the heat became punishing. Farid's water was half gone, and ahead lay only endless dunes with no shelter in sight. For the first time since their escape, doubt crept into his mind. Have I doomed us both? He whispered. Jabbar suddenly changed direction, veering toward a seemingly featureless expanse of sand. Farid was about to correct their course when the camel dropped to his knees and began to dig with powerful front legs. What are you, Farid's question died as the unmistakable scent of water rose from the disturbed sand. Within moments, Jabbar had created a small depression that slowly filled with clear, cool water. A hidden spring, invisible on the surface yet somehow sensed by the remarkable camel. As Farid refilled his water skin, his fingers struck something hard buried in the damp sand. Curious, he excavated the object, a small brass instrument, unlike anything he had seen before. Circular, with intricate engravings and a needle that spun freely on its center, it resembled a compass, yet the needle pointed not north, but directly east. What treasure have you found us, Jabbar? The camel nudged the instrument, and Farid noticed that when held near water, the needle's color changed from brass to blue. A water compass, a priceless tool in the desert. You continue to amaze me, Farid said, securing the compass in his pouch. Their rest was cut short by the distant whinny of horses. The pursuers had gained ground during their stop. Climbing back onto Jabbar, Farid spotted a line of rocky outcroppings to the northeast. There, he decided, we can lose them among the rocks. Jabbar surged forward with renewed strength. The camel's endurance seemed supernatural, maintaining a pace that would exhaust ordinary mounts. Still, the horsemen gradually closed the gap, their mounts bred for desert pursuit. The rocky sanctuary still lay a quarter-hour ahead when an arrow whistled past Farid's ear. Halt in the name of Master Qasim, a voice bellowed across the dunes. 4 riders had broken ahead of the main group, their horses lathered with sweat but still dangerous. Another arrow flew, grazing Jabbar's flank. The camel let out a sound unlike any Farid had heard, not a pained bellow but an angry roar that echoed across the wasteland. With a sudden burst of speed that seemed impossible, Jabbar charged directly toward a towering dune. "No, Jabbar, we'll never climb that in time." The camel ignored him. At the base of the dune, instead of attempting to climb, Jabbar threw himself sideways, rolling in the loose sand. Farid barely managed to jump clear, tumbling alongside. The pursuing riders slowed in confusion until the entire face of the dune began to collapse. Jabbar's weight had triggered a massive sandslide that engulfed the closest pursuers. Their screams were quickly silenced as tons of sand buried men and horses alike. Farid stared in shock. "Did you know that would happen?" Jabbar's eyes held a gleam that could only be described as satisfaction. The remaining pursuers pulled back, unwilling to risk the same fate. Taking advantage of the reprieve, Farid and Jabbar made for the rocks, reaching them as the sun began its descent. The maze-like formations provided perfect concealment. After navigating the twisting passages, they emerged on the eastern side to find an unexpected sight. A small caravan of colorfully decorated wagons circled for the night. "Traders," Farid whispered, watching as men and women set up camp. "But can we trust them?" Before he could decide, a cheerful voice called out, "Well now, what have we here?" A man and a most extraordinary camel, appearing like spirits from the stones. An older woman with skin tanned dark by the sun approached, showing no fear of Jabbar's imposing size. "I am Samira of the Free Traders," she said, "and unless I miss my guess, you two are running from something or someone." Farid tensed, ready to flee, but Jabbar remained calm, even lowering his head in greeting to the woman. "You have the look of escaped property," Samira continued, her voice matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "Fortunately for you, we free traders care little for the ownership claims of city masters. We answer to no sultan or merchant lord." She gestured toward their camp. "Come, share our fire and food tonight. The desert grows cold and dangerous after dark, and it seems you both have quite a tale to tell." Jabbar nudged Farid forward, his instincts once again guiding their path. With pursuers still searching in the vast desert ahead, a single night of safety seemed a gift too precious to refuse. The Free Traders' camp buzzed with activity as dawn broke. Farid emerged from the tent Samira had provided, finding Jabbar already awake and surrounded by curious children who giggled as the massive camel gently nuzzled their outstretched hands. "Your companion has made quite an impression," Samira said, joining Farid, "particularly when he helped find a water source for our depleted reserves. A valuable skill." Farid watched as Jabbar lowered himself to allow a small girl to climb onto his back. "He's full of surprises. As are you, perhaps." Samira's keen eyes studied him. "That birthmark on your wrist, you keep covering it, but I caught a glimpse. I've seen its like before." Farid tensed. "Where?" "In the weaving patterns of the Banu Sabir tribe. The very people you seek." She smiled at his surprise. "Yes, we trade with them regularly. In fact, we journey to their summer grazing grounds tomorrow." Providence, it seemed, had guided them to the perfect allies. Over the next 3 days, traveling with the Free Traders proved both educational and restorative. Farid learned desert survival from experts, how to read the stars, find edible plants, and conserve water. The caravan master, Samira's husband Omar, taught him to ride properly, though Jabbar seemed to need little guidance. "That camel understands more than most men I've met," Omar commented after watching Jabbar navigate a treacherous ravine without command. On the 4th day, they spotted riders on the horizon, scouts for the Banu Sabir, according to Samira. The nomads approached cautiously until they recognized the Free Traders' banners. The leader of the scouts, a weathered man named Tariq, greeted them warmly until his eyes fell on Jabbar. His expression transformed to one of reverence. "The prophecy comes to life before my eyes," he murmured, dismounting and approaching Farid. "You bear the mark as well." Farid reluctantly showed his birthmark. "The crescent of the chosen," Tariq breathed. Our eldest will want to meet you immediately. The Banu Saba's sprawling encampment appeared like a mirage, dozens of colorful tents spread across a hidden valley where underground springs created a rare oasis. Hundreds of camels grazed on sparse vegetation, but none matched Jabbar's extraordinary size and bearing. At the center stood the largest tent, where Tariq led them. Inside, seated on ornate cushions, waited a woman, so ancient her face resembled the desert itself, lined, weathered, yet somehow timeless. "Grandmother Zaida," Tariq announced. "I bring the chosen rider and his guardian." The old woman's cloudy eyes somehow found Farid unerringly. "Come closer, child of the prophecy." Jabbar followed Farid without hesitation, kneeling before the elder. Zaida placed gnarled hands on both their heads. "Yes," she whispered, "the patterns match. The desert has awakened its champions at last." From behind her, attendants brought forth a rolled tapestry. When unfurled, it revealed an intricately woven scene of a rider on a massive camel, standing before a hidden paradise, with the crescent mark prominently displayed on both figures. "This weaving has been passed down through 20 generations, Zaida explained. "It tells of a time when the desert would suffer under a cruel ruler who hoards water and life itself. Then would come the chosen rider and sacred guardian, born with matching signs, destined to discover the lost oasis and restore balance to the sands." Farid studied the tapestry, recognizing scenes similar to those on Malik's parchment fragment. "But I'm no hero, just a former slave who got lucky. Heroes rarely recognize themselves until circumstances force their hand," Zaida replied. "The prophecy does not speak of someone seeking greatness, but of one whose compassion matches his courage." Over the following weeks, the Banu Sabir became Farid's family. He trained in their ways, riding, fighting with curved blades, reading the desert's subtle languages. Jabbar, meanwhile, grew stronger under their care, displaying new abilities almost daily. He could sense approaching sandstorms hours before they appeared, and communicate with the tribe's other camels who treated him with obvious deference. Farid's happiness was interrupted one evening when Tariq returned from a scouting mission, his expression grave. "Sultan's men in the western passes," he reported. "Not just any soldiers, the elite imperial trackers. They bear strange crystals said to find anyone the Sultan seeks." Zaida turned to Farid. "The prophecy has always warned that the forces of tyranny would sense the awakening of the desert's champions. Your presence endangers our people now." "Then I should leave," Farid said immediately. "Not alone," she corrected. "Your path lies eastward, toward the Crimson Canyon. There you'll find the next piece of your journey. But you must go before dawn." That night, as Farid prepared for departure, a young tribeswoman named Lila approached with a small bundle, sandbread and dried fruit. She explained, and this she handed him a small section of the prophetic tapestry. "Grandmother Zaida says you should carry a piece of the prophecy with you, to remind you that you're never truly alone." As stars brightened above the sleeping camp, Farid whispered to Jabbar, "Ready for tomorrow, my friend." The camel's knowing eyes reflected the constellations, as if the very stars had aligned to guide their way. Dawn painted the eastern sky crimson as Farid and Jabbar departed the Banu Sabir camp. The nomads had provided supplies, weapons and guidance, but Farid felt the weight of solitude as the friendly tents disappeared behind the dunes. "Just us again, my friend," he murmured to Jabbar, who responded with a reassuring rumble. For 3 days they traveled eastward toward the Crimson Canyons. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, vast salt flats where nothing lived, wind-carved stone formations that resembled ancient monsters, and steep dunes that required all of Jabbar's formidable strength to climb. On the 4th morning, Farid awoke to find Jabbar already standing, ears pricked toward the western horizon, body tensed. "What is it?" Farid asked, instantly alert. The camel made a low, warning sound, eyes fixed on the distant sands. Though Farid could see nothing, he had learned to trust Jabbar's senses. They broke camp quickly and continued eastward at a punishing pace. By midday, Farid spotted what had alarmed Jabbar, a dust cloud moving with unnatural precision across the desert. Not the chaotic billowing of a storm, but the deliberate advance of skilled trackers. The Sultan's men, he realized. How did they find us so quickly? As if in answer, the wind shifted, carrying a faint, unnatural glow from the pursuing party. Through Farid's small brass spyglass, another gift from the Banu Sabir, he saw riders bearing glowing crystals that pulsed with increasing brightness as they followed his trail. Tracking crystals, Farid remembered Tariq's warning. They're homing in on us like hawks to prey. They pushed harder, Jabbar maintaining a remarkable pace despite the scorching afternoon heat. By dusk, they had reached the first of the stone labyrinth that marked the approach to the Crimson Canyons. A maze of wind-carved passages and towering rock formation. We can lose them here, Farid hoped, guiding Jabbar into the narrowest passages where horses would struggle to follow. Night fell, bringing welcome coolness, but new dangers. Nocturnal predators called from hidden crevices, and loose stones threatened to betray their position with every step. Still they pressed on by starlight, Jabbar navigating the treacherous terrain with uncanny sureness. Near midnight, they paused in a sheltered grotto to rest. Farid rationed their water, grimly aware that the hunters would have larger supplies. We can't outrun them forever, he told Jabbar, stroking the camel's muscular neck. Sooner or later, we must stand and fight. As if understanding, Jabbar shifted, revealing a small depression in the sand. Curious, Farid dug with his fingers and uncovered a smooth, round stone that gleamed with an inner light, similar to the tracker's crystals, yet different. Where theirs glowed red, this one shimmered with a cool blue radiance. The moment Farid touched it, the crystal dimmed. When Jabbar nosed it, the light returned, stronger than before. A countermeasure, Farid wondered aloud. Experimentation revealed its nature. The blue crystal weakened the red tracking crystals when brought near them. A defensive tool, perhaps, left by others who had fled the Sultan's reach. Their respite proved brief. Before dawn, Jabbar's warning grunt alerted Farid to approaching danger. The hunters had entered the stone labyrinth, splitting into smaller groups to cover more ground. Hiding was no longer an option. Farid mounted Jabbar, gripping his curved Banu Sabir blade. They would need to break through the closing net. The first confrontation came at a junction of three narrow passages. Two hunters appeared suddenly, their tracking crystals flaring bright red as they spotted their quarry. "Halt in the Sultan's name," one commanded, unsheathing a wickedly curved sword. Farid answered by holding up the blue crystal. The tracker's crystals immediately dimmed, confusion crossing their faces. In that moment of hesitation, Jabbar charged. Farid swung his blade, disarming one hunter, while Jabbar's powerful shoulder sent the other flying into the stone wall. "Go," Farid urged, and Jabbar bolted through the briefly opened path. More hunters converged as they fled deeper into the labyrinth. At each encounter, the blue crystal provided moments of advantage, but their pursuers were skilled warriors. Farid collected cuts and bruises, while Jabbar's hide was slashed in several places. When hope seemed dimmest, nature intervened. The morning wind rose suddenly, carrying ominous rumbling. Farid recognized the sound from his time with the Banu Sabir. A sandstorm approached, and a massive one. "We need shelter quickly," he told Jabbar. The camel needed no urging, changing direction toward a towering rock formation. As they approached, Farid saw not just a random stone outcrop, but something more: straight lines, carved symbols, the unmistakable signs of ancient construction, half buried in sand. Behind them, the hunters shouted in alarm as the storm front appeared, a wall of sand rising hundreds of feet into the sky, devouring everything in its path. Jabbar found an opening in the weathered structure, just as the first violent gusts hit. They slipped inside as the world disappeared in howling brown fury. In the sudden darkness, Farid struck a small flame. The light revealed weathered stone walls covered in carvings, not a natural cave, but a human-made chamber. The symbols matched those on the parchment fragment Malik had given him. "What is this place?" Farid whispered, his voice echoing in spaces far larger than he had imagined. The sandstorm howled outside, but within the ancient structure, a profound silence reigned. Farid's small flame revealed a vast chamber, its walls covered in elaborate carvings. Jabbar moved with unusual reverence, as if recognizing the sanctity of the space. "This is no mere shelter," Farid whispered, his voice carrying strange echoes. "This is a temple." Using tinder from his pack, he fashioned a proper torch. The improved light revealed the true scale of the chamber. Massive columns rose to support a ceiling so high it remained in darkness. The floor, once polished stone, was now half buried in centuries of wind-blown sand. Farid approached the nearest wall, where the carvings were best preserved. They depicted humans and camels together, not as master and beast, but as partners. In one scene, a caravan crossed desert dunes. In another, a single rider on a magnificent camel stood before what appeared to be a doorway in a mountain. Below these images ran lines of script, similar to those on Malik's parchment fragment. "I wish I could read this," Farid sighed, tracing the symbols with his fingertips. To his astonishment, Jabbar moved beside him and pressed his muzzle against a particular section of wall. The camel's birthmark began to glow faintly, and in response, identical symbols on the wall illuminated with soft blue light. "How did you—" Farid's question died as the glowing script began to rearrange itself, transforming into characters he could understand. "In the time before time," he read aloud, "when the desert was a sea of grass and water flowed freely, the guardians came from the stars. They took the form of the desert's children, man and camel, and taught the ways of water-finding and life-preserving. When the great drought came, the guardians created the hidden paradise as sanctuary, appointing keepers marked with the crescent sign, one to guide, one to protect, together to preserve the greatest treasure of the sands." The glowing script faded, but other sections began to illuminate as Jabbar moved along the wall. Farid followed, reading fragments of an ancient history. The first betrayal came from within, the guardian's gift corrupted by greed. Water became power, paradise sealed until the worthy return. The marks will find each other when the need is greatest. Farid's mind reeled. This is far older than the prophecy the Banu Sabir know. This is its origin. Jabbar nudged him toward a particular carving, a massive camel and rider, standing before what appeared to be a great sealed doorway. Both bore the crescent mark, and from their marks a key-like shape formed. "Is this what we're meant to find? This hidden paradise?" Farid asked, receiving a soft grunt of affirmation from Jabbar. They explored deeper into the temple, finding chambers where ancient vessels once held water and grain, living quarters for long-vanished priests. And finally a central sanctum. Here a raised dais supported an altar-like stone. Set into its surface was a shallow depression in the shape of the crescent mark. When Jabbar approached, his birthmark glowed brighter. Farid, following instinct, placed his wrist over the depression. Their combined marks cast the chamber in blue radiance. The altar stone shifted, revealing a hidden compartment containing a small metal cylinder. Inside was another fragment of ancient parchment, this one showing a map with landmarks Farid recognized: the Crimson Canyons, the Glass Desert, and beyond them a mountain range where a single peak was marked with the crescent symbol. "The next step in our journey," Farid realized. A sudden crash echoed from the temple entrance. The storm had passed, and with it their brief sanctuary. "They've found us," Farid whispered, hastily returning the map to its cylinder and securing it in his garments. Jabbar led him to a rear passage, barely visible behind fallen debris. As they navigated the narrow corridor, they heard voices echoing through the temple. The Sultan's hunters marveling at their discovery even as they searched for their quarry. The Sultan must be told. An ancient temple, just as the legends claimed. Find the slave and the camel. They must not escape. The passage inclined upward, eventually emerging through a half-collapsed opening high on the canyon wall. From this vantage, Farid could see a dozen imperial soldiers establishing camp at the temple entrance below. "We can't go back," he told Jabbar. "Whatever secrets remain there are lost to us now." The camel seemed unconcerned, his attention fixed eastward, where the crimson canyons opened into a vast expanse of red-tinted sand, the legendary glass desert, forged in some ancient cataclysm that had melted sand into translucent sheets that caught the sunlight like countless jewels. A treacherous crossing by all accounts, but the map showed no alternative route to the mountains beyond. "Is that truly our path?" Farid asked, daunted by the shimmering heat waves rising from the glass plains. Jabbar's steady gaze held certainty. Whatever dangers the glass desert held, they paled against the knowledge they now carried, that their journey was part of something far more ancient and significant than either had imagined. With one last look at the temple now claimed by the Sultan's men, Farid turned eastward. "Lead on, my friend, we have a paradise to find." The glass desert lived up to its fearsome reputation. By day, the sun reflected blindingly off the crystallized sand, forcing Farid to wear a narrow eye slit woven from palm fibers. By night, the glass plains radiated stored heat like a baker's oven, allowing little relief from the scorching temperatures. 3 days into this hellish crossing, their water ran dangerously low. Even Jabbar, with his remarkable endurance, showed signs of fatigue, his powerful stride slowing as the razor-sharp glass shards cut into his feet, despite the protective wrappings Farid had fashioned. Just a little further, Farid encouraged, though he had no idea what lay ahead. The map showed only that they must cross this terrible place to reach the mountains beyond. As the 4th day dawned, a new threat emerged, a wall of darkness on the horizon. Another sandstorm, Farid realized with dread. On the open glass plains they would have no shelter. Yet as the dark mass approached, he noticed something odd. It moved against the wind, and rather than the billowing chaos of a storm, it maintained a perfect dome shape. Within the darkness, flashes of purple light pulsed, like captured lightning. "What manner of desert magic is this?" he whispered. Jabbar, surprisingly, showed no fear. Instead, the great camel knelt, indicating Farid should dismount. "You want us to wait for it? Are you certain?" The darkness accelerated toward them, enveloping the glass plains in its shadow. As it reached them, Farid braced himself, but instead of howling winds, he heard a woman's laughter. The darkness dissipated like smoke, revealing a figure standing before them. Tall and imposing, she wore robes of midnight blue embroidered with silver constellations. Her skin was dark as ebony, her hair white as desert salt, and her eyes, Farid gasped, her eyes were the same golden amber as Jabbar's. "So," she said, her voice carrying the rasp of seldom-used vocal cords, "the chosen rider and his guardian have finally found their way to me. Took you long enough." Jabbar immediately approached the woman, lowering his great head in what appeared to be reverence. She placed a hand on his forehead, and their birthmarks briefly glowed in unison. "Who are you?" Farid asked, finding his voice at last. "I am called many things by those who fear me. Desert witch, sand sorceress, dune demon." She smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "You may call me Zara. I am the keeper of forgotten ways." She turned, gesturing for them to follow. Where she walked, the glass sand transformed to soft, normal grains beneath her feet. "Come. My dwelling is near, and we have much to discuss before the Sultan's men reach the edge of the glass desert." Her dwelling proved to be a massive tent, seemingly woven from the night sky itself, standing impossibly in the middle of the glass plains with no visible support. Inside, the space expanded far beyond what should have been possible, containing rooms within rooms, shelves of ancient texts, bubbling cauldrons and cages housing creatures Farid had never seen before. "Sit," Zara commanded, indicating cushions arranged around a low table. "Drink, the water is clean." Farid hesitated, remembering tales of desert witches who ensorcelled unwary travelers. Zara laughed again. "If I wished you harm, boy, I would have let the glass plains have you, or perhaps the Sultan's men, or the dozen other threats you've unknowingly avoided through blind luck and this one's guidance." She nodded toward Jabbar, who had already begun drinking from a basin that continuously refilled itself. Cautiously, Farid drank. The water tasted sweeter than any he'd known, instantly revitalizing his parched body. "Now," Zara said, sitting cross-legged opposite him, "show me the map you found in the temple." Startled, Farid asked, "How did you?" "I know many things. The temple has awakened after centuries of slumber. The birthmarks are active again. The Sultan grows increasingly desperate to find you both. And you," her penetrating gaze fixed on him, "you still have no idea what power you carry." Reluctantly, Farid produced the map cylinder. Zara studied it briefly. "Yes, this shows the way, but you are not yet ready to walk it. The mountains hold dangers greater than mere men with swords." "Then help us prepare," Farid said. "The Sultan's hunters draw closer each day." "Bold," Zara remarked, "but not foolish." "Very well, I will teach you what I can in the time we have." The following days passed in a whirlwind of instruction. Zara taught Farid ancient languages, desert magic, and the secret histories not recorded in any temple. He learned to read the stars, communicate with desert creatures, and find water in the most barren places. For Jabbar, she crafted a special saddle from materials she pulled from thin air, leather that never chafed, adorned with protective symbols and gems that glowed with inner light. "This will strengthen your bond," she explained, as she fitted it to Jabbar's broad back. "The birthmarks connect you, but this saddle will amplify that connection. What one senses, the other will know. What one feels, the other will share." On the seventh night, as they sat beneath the impossible stars inside Zara's tent, she suddenly stiffened. "They've found a way across the glass," she announced. "Cleverer than I expected." "The Sultan's men?" Farid asked, already gathering his belongings. "Yes, they've acquired glass-walking shoes from the southern nomads. They'll reach us by noon tomorrow." She rose, retrieving a bundle wrapped in shimmering cloth. "You must leave before dawn. Take the eastern path through the Crystal Canyon. It's hidden from ordinary sight, but Jabbar will see it." She handed him the bundle. "This contains knowledge too dangerous to speak aloud. Open it only when you reach the mountains of the moon." As Farid secured the bundle, Zara placed her hands on both his and Jabbar's heads, whispering words that seemed to twist the air around them. "I have shielded you from magical tracking for a time," she said. "It won't last forever, but it should get you to the mountains. Remember all I've taught you. The fate of the desert, perhaps the world, depends on you finding the lost oasis before the Sultan." The Crystal Canyon proved as wondrous as it was treacherous. Towering walls of multicolored quartz caught the sunlight, casting prismatic rainbows across their path. Beautiful, yes, but the beauty concealed deadly sharp edges and unstable passages that could collapse without warning. Jabbar navigated the hazards with uncanny precision, his enhanced connection with Farid through Zara's saddle, allowing them to move as one being. Thoughts and sensations flowed between them, Farid experiencing the world through Jabbar's heightened senses, while Jabbar understood complex concepts through Farid's human perception. "We're truly bonded now," Farid marveled as they emerged from the canyon on the third day. Before them stretched a vast salt flat that shimmered with heat. According to Zara's directions, they would find the Mirage Market somewhere in this desolate expanse, a legendary gathering that appeared and disappeared like its namesake, where outcasts and mystics traded in goods too strange or dangerous for ordinary bazaar. How will we find something that isn't meant to be found? Farid wondered aloud. Jabbar's response came as a shared image in his mind. The water compass they had discovered weeks ago. Farid retrieved it from his pack, watching as its needle spun wildly before settling on a direction that seemed no different from any other part of the endless white plain. They traveled through the night, when the salt flats cooled enough for safe passage. Near dawn, a curious phenomenon appeared on the horizon, rippling air that coalesced into the shadowy outlines of tents, wagons, and milling figures. The markets, Farid breathed, hardly believing his eyes. As they approached, the mirage solidified into reality, a sprawling marketplace, unlike any Farid had seen. Traders from lands he'd never heard of hawked wares, both mundane and mystical. Tents of impossible colors housed fortune-tellers, weaponsmiths, and alchemists. Creatures that belonged in children's tales moved freely among humans of every description. "Stay close," Farid told Jabbar, though the camel's imposing size already cleared a path through the crowd. Eyes followed them, some curious, others calculate. Farid kept his birthmark covered, and Jabbar's partially concealed beneath decorative tassels, heeding Zara's warning about spies. They approached a tent where an elderly man with skin like polished mahogany examined oddities through a jeweler's loupe. "We seek supplies for mountain travel," Farid said, using the coded phrase Zara had taught him. The man glanced up, his gaze lingering on Jabbar before nodding slightly. "The mountains are treacherous this season. You'll need special accommodations." He disappeared behind a curtain, returning with a leather-bound case. "Maps," he explained quietly, "but not ordinary ones." Inside the case lay what appeared to be blank parchment. When Farid looked quizzical, the merchant chuckled. "Moonlight maps reveal their secrets only under the moon's glow. Different phases show different paths." He named a price that would have purchased a small house in Marrakesh. Farid bartered with items Zara had provided: rare herbs, enchanted trinkets, and finally a small vial of what she had called dream essence. The merchant's eyes widened at the last item, and the deal was struck immediately. As they continued through the market, Farid gathered supplies: lightweight but warm clothing for the mountains, specialized tools for climbing, preserved foods that would never spoil. Each vendor seemed to know exactly what they would need without being told, and each accepted Zara's strange currencies without question. Near the market center, a commotion drew their attention. A crowd had gathered around a raised platform where a man in elaborate robes addressed the onlookers. A most generous reward from the Sultan himself. Information leading to the capture of a slave traveling with an unusually large camel, both bearing a crescent birthmark. "They are enemies of the realm, dangerous practitioners of forbidden magic." Farid pulled his hood lower, but it was too late. A thin man with darting eyes had spotted them and was now pushing through the crowd toward the announcer, pointing in their direction. "There, the marked ones." Chaos erupted. Some market-goers fled, others surged forward, either to claim the reward or to see the spectacle. Still others, those who opposed the Sultan's rule, moved to block the informant's path. This way, a hooded figure grabbed Farid's arm, pulling him toward a narrow alley between tents. Quickly, before the Sultan's men organize, with Jabbar following close behind, they ducked through a bewildering maze of passages, eventually emerging at a small encampment on the market's edge. A dozen hard-faced men and women in mismatched armor greeted them. "Desert Rebellion," their guide explained, throwing back her hood to reveal a scarred face and determined eyes. "We fight the Sultan's tyranny. I am Nadia, second commander." "How did you know to help us?" Farid asked. "Zara sent word, and the birthmark is becoming known as a symbol of resistance." She gestured to a flag where the crescent symbol had been embroidered. Many now looked to the prophecy for hope. That night, around a carefully shielded fire, Nadia spread out the moonlight map. Under the quarter moon's glow, faint lines appeared, showing secret passages through the mountains of the moon. The Sultan's forces control all main passes. she explained, but these hidden trails are known only to smugglers and rebels. We can guide you part way. Why help us? Farid asked. Because the Sultan fears you, Nadia replied simply. For years he has hoarded water, leaving outer villages to wither and die. If the prophecy is true, if you can find the lost oasis, perhaps water will flow freely again. A lookout's whistle cut through the night. Imperial guards, they've found us. Go now, Nadia urged, thrusting the map into Farid's hands. We'll hold them off. The rebellion needs its symbol of hope to survive. As mounted soldiers crashed into the rebel camp, Farid and Jabbar slipped away into the darkness. The precious map clutched tightly in Farid's hand, the sounds of battle fading behind them. The mountains of the moon earned their name from the pale, luminous stone that composed their jagged peaks. By day, they absorbed the desert sun. By night, they released that light in a soft silver glow that transformed the landscape into something otherworldly. 5 days after fleeing the mirage markets, Farid and Jabbar reached the foothills. The moonlight map had guided them through hidden valleys and concealed passes where imperial patrols never ventured. Now, as they gazed up at the towering mountains, the true challenge became apparent. These paths were meant for mountain goats, not camels, Farid murmured, studying the narrow trails that switchbacked up the steep slopes. Yet Jabbar showed no hesitation. The massive camel approached the first incline with confidence, his powerful legs finding purchase on loose scree that would have sent lesser beasts tumbling. Their enhanced connection through Zara's saddle allowed Farid to feel Jabbar's absolute certainty. The camel knew these mountains somehow, as if ancestral memory guided his steps. The ascent proved grueling nonetheless. Thin air made breathing difficult, while nighttime temperatures plummeted to bone-chilling cold. By the third day in the mountains, Farid's lips were cracked, his lungs burning with each breath. Only Jabbar's warmth kept him from freezing during the bitter nights. At dawn on the 4th day, they rounded a sharp bend to find their path blocked by a group of figures, tall and lean, with skin pale as the moonstone surrounding them. They wore clothing fashioned from some silvery material that shifted colors with each movement. Each carried a slender spear tipped with crystal. Hulk Lalanders, commanded their leader, a woman whose eyes reflected the mountain's glow. You trespass on the sacred heights of the Moon Tribe. Farid raised his hands to show he carried no weapons. We seek only passage through your lands. We mean no harm, yet harm follows you, the woman replied. The Sultan's men desecrate our lower valleys with their presence, and the reason for their trespass stands before me. Her spear tip lowered to point at Jabbar's partially visible birthmark. We didn't ask for this pursuit, Farid said. Intention matters little. Result is everything. She gestured to her warriors. Bind them, the council will decide their fate. Despite Jabbar's strength, they were outnumbered. Fighting would only confirm the tribe's suspicions. Farid placed a calming hand on Jabbar's neck as the tribe's people secured them with ropes, woven from some fibrous mountain plant. They were led higher into the mountains, beyond paths shown on any map, until they reached a hidden valley nestled between 3 peaks. There, a village of domed structures, built from the same luminous stone, spread before them. At the center stood a circular building larger than the rest, its entrance flanked by carved pillars, depicting figures half human, half celestial. Inside, seated on stone benches, arranged in ascending semicircles, waited the tribal council. Elders whose white hair and lined faces spoke of incredible age, yet whose eyes remained clear and piercing. Outlanders, announced the chief elder, a man whose elaborate silver headdress marked his authority. You bring danger to our sanctuary. For generations we have lived apart from the desert kingdoms and their endless wars over water and power. Now the Sultan's soldiers profane our sacred slopes, and you are the cause. Great Elder, Farid began respectfully, we journey toward the crescent mountain shown on ancient maps. We believe it holds the key to ending the very tyranny that threatens your people. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The chief elder raised his hand for silence. Many seek the mountain of the crescent. None have found what they sought. His gaze sharpened, yet none before bore the mark. At a gesture from the elder, a young tribal member approached with a crystal the size of a man's palm. Unlike the tracking crystals of the Sultan's men, this one gleamed with inner starlight. The star crystal reveals truth. The elder explained, if you are indeed the chosen rider of prophecy, it will recognize you. The crystal was placed before Farid and Jabbar. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, as Farid's doubt began to grow, the birthmark on his wrist warmed. Simultaneously, Jabbar's mark began to glow. In response, the star crystal flared with brilliant white light that filled the chamber. Gasps echoed from the assembled tribe. The chief elder himself rose from his seat, approaching Farid with newfound reverence. The crystal has not responded thus in 10 generations, he said, his voice hushed. Not since the last guardian departed toward the hidden paradise. He bowed deeply. Forgive our suspicion, chosen one. The Moon tribe has awaited your coming. That night a feast was held in their honor. Farid learned that the Moon tribe had served as guardians of mountain passages leading to the lost oasis since ancient times. When the desert began to die centuries ago, they had retreated higher into the mountains, preserving knowledge of the old ways while the lowlands descended into tyranny and constant struggle for water. We will teach you what you need to survive the final journey, the chief elder promised. The Crescent Mountain holds the entrance to the lost oasis, but it is protected by trials no ordinary man could survive. Over the following days, tribal warriors trained Farid in mountain combat techniques, fighting in thin air, using terrain to advantage, moving silently across loose stone. Others taught him to read the mountain's moods, to predict deadly avalanches and sudden storms. Through it all, the star crystal remained with them, its glow strengthening as Farid and Jabbar's abilities grew. The tribe regarded it as confirmation of their sacred duty. The crystal has chosen, the chief elder told Farid one evening. When you depart, it must go with you, a key to unlock what lies beyond the Crescent Mountain. But even as Farid's training progressed, scouts reported troubling news. The Sultan himself had arrived in the foothills with his elite guard, determined to capture the bearers of the birthmark at any cost. The council chamber fell silent as the scout finished his report. The Sultan's forces had established a fortified camp at the mountain's base, with hundreds of elite warriors and strange mechanical devices transported across the desert at great expense. He has never left his palace for any military campaign in 20 years, the chief elder remarked. This pursuit goes beyond mere tyranny. He is desperate. Farid felt the weight of every gaze in the chamber. Why would he commit such resources to capture one former slave and a camel? An elderly tribeswoman spoke up, her voice thin but strong. Because the prophecy threatens not just his rule, but the source of his power. The Sultan controls the desert because he controls water. If the lost oasis is found and water flows freely again, his empire crumbles, Farid finished. The mood in the village grew tense over the following days. Warriors patrolled the secret paths, while families prepared emergency caches in higher caves. Farid continued his training with renewed urgency, now learning to defend against the Sultan's specialized weapons, heat-seeking arrows, poisoned blades, and devices that could trigger rock slides from a distance. On the 7th day after the scout's report, a lone figure appeared on the path leading to the village, a man in the elaborate robes of an imperial emissary, carrying a white flag of truce. Tribal warriors escorted him to the council chamber, where Farid and the elders waited. The emissary bowed with practiced elegance. I bring words from the divine Sultan, light of the desert, master of the flowing waters, keeper of paradise on earth. Plainly, the chief elder commanded. What does your master want? He wishes to address the one called Farid directly. The emissary turned, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Jabbar standing protectively beside Farid. And the camel. Farid nodded. I'm listening, The emissary produced an ornate scroll case of gold and ivory. His supreme magnificence offers terms. He unrolled the document with a flourish. To the bearer of the crescent mark, greetings. The formal language could not disguise the essence of the Sultan's message. In exchange for Jabbar and any information about the lost oasis, Farid would receive complete freedom and citizenship in the empire. Wealth equal to that of a provincial governor, a palace in the capital with 50 servants. Marriage into a noble family, position as royal advisor on desert affairs. The Sultan recognizes your unique qualities. The emissary continued smoothly. It would be a shame to waste such potential in a futile quest that can only end in your capture or death. Why not use your gifts to help govern, to improve lives through proper channels? Through their enhanced connection, Farid felt Jabbar's immediate reaction, distrust and rejection so powerful it made his own skin prickle. "And if I refuse?" Farid asked. The emissary smiled tightly. "Then the Sultan cannot guarantee the safety of this village or its people when his forces arrive to take you by less diplomatic means." Murmurs of anger rippled through the council chamber. The chief elder rose, hand on the ceremonial dagger at his back. "You dare threaten us in our own sacred hall?" "I merely state facts," the emissary replied. "The Sultan's patience grows thin. He has brought enough men to search every cave, every crevice of these mountains." He turned back to Farid. "You have until sunrise tomorrow to decide. I will await your answer at the boundary stone." After the emissary departed, heated debate erupted among the tribe. Some argued for immediate relocation to their highest sanctuaries. Others suggested using mountain tactics to ambush the Sultan's forces in the narrow passes. "What about accepting the offer?" asked a young tribal councillor, earning glares from his peers. "Not to betray the prophecy, but to buy time, to get close to the Sultan and sacrifice Jabbar?" Farid's voice cut through the chamber. "Even suggesting it shows you don't understand what we face. The Sultan doesn't want to negotiate, he wants to eliminate any threat to his power." He placed a hand on Jabbar's neck, feeling the Cammel's absolute certainty flowing through their connection. "The prophecy isn't just about finding water. It's about restoring balance that was broken long ago. The Sultan knows this, which is why he fears us." The chief elder nodded slowly. "What will you do, chosen right?" Farid looked around the chamber at the proud, independent people who had sheltered and trained him. "I won't bring destruction to your village. Jabbar and I will leave tonight, drawing the Sultan's forces away from your people." "That is not our way," the elder protested. "The Moon tribe does not abandon allies, nor do we," said Farid. "But the final path is one we must walk alone." He unfolded the moonlight map, pointing to a narrow pass, not far from their location. "This route leads most directly to the Crescent Mountain. We'll depart secretly while a decoy group leads the emissary to believe we're considering his offer." The tribal weaponsmith stepped forward. "Then you must go prepared." He presented Farid with a slender blade forged from the same luminous metal as their spears. Moonstone steel, it cuts through imperial armor like cloth and never loses its edge. As preparations were made in hushed tones, Farid studied the Sultan's decree once more. The document itself revealed much: the perfect calligraphy, the precious materials, the elaborate seal. This was no hasty proposal, but a carefully crafted lure, perhaps prepared long before the emissary's arrival. The Sultan was playing a game with pieces positioned far in advance. But so, Farid realized, were the ancient forces that had brought him and Jabbar together. Midnight shadows draped the Moon tribe village as Farid made final preparations for departure. The chief elder had assigned their most skilled scout, a wiry man named Tariq, to guide them through treacherous mountain passages toward the Crescent Peak. "We leave no tracks on stone," Tariq assured him, strapping lightweight provisions to Jabbar's enhanced saddle. "By the time the Sultan's men realize you've gone, we'll be halfway to the sacred boundary." A small group of tribal warriors would head in the opposite direction at dawn, creating a diversion to buy them time. The plan seemed sound until Jabber suddenly raised his head, nostrils flaring. "What is it?" Farid whispered, instantly alert. Through their connection, he sensed Jabber's unease. Someone was watching them. Farid scanned the shadows between the luminous stone dwellings, but saw nothing unusual, probably just nerves. Tariq suggested, "The mountains play tricks on the mind at night." Yet Jabber remained agitated as they slipped from the village through a hidden path behind the council chamber. The massive camel moved with surprising stealth, his feet wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound of hooves on stone. They traveled under starlight, climbing ever higher along narrow ledges where a single misstep meant certain death. The air grew thinner, each breath more labored. By false dawn, they had reached a high pass that offered their first view of the legendary Crescent Mountain, a massive peak whose curved summit indeed resembled the birthmark they carried. "We rest here briefly," Tariq decided, indicating a sheltered hollow. "The next stretch offers no cover." As Farid collected snow to melt for drinking water, a faint sound reached him, the distant clink of metal on stone. He froze, straining to Tariq. He called softly, "Did you hear?" The warning died in his throat as he turned to find Tariq standing rigidly, the point of a slender dagger pressed against his back. Behind him loomed a figure Farid recognized. Kiran, a junior member of the tribal council who had argued for accepting the Sultan's offer. "I'm sorry it came to this," Kiran said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "But the Sultan's forces would destroy our entire tribe. One life weighed against hundreds. The choice is clear." "You've betrayed your own people," Farid said, anger rising. "I've saved them," Kiran countered. "The Sultan swore to spare the tribe if I delivered you to him. His men await in the ravine below." Jabbar moved with explosive speed, lunging toward the traitor. But Kiran had anticipated this. With a cruel twist, he drove his blade into Tariq's back. As the scout collapsed, Kiran rolled away, producing a small metal whistle. Its piercing tone echoed through the mountains, and within moments, armed figures appeared on the ridges above and below their position. Imperial soldiers in desert armor, adapted for mountain warfare, their weapons trained on Farid and Jabbar. "Surrender now," Kiran commanded, "or they'll fill you both with arrows." Farid locked eyes with Jabbar, their connection conveying more than words ever could. They would not be taken, not when they had come so far. As one, they charged toward the narrowest part of the ridge, where fewer soldiers blocked their path. Arrows whistled past them. One grazed Farid's shoulder. Another embedded itself in Jabbar's saddle. The camel's powerful legs propelled them forward with supernatural speed, scattering the soldiers who had expected immediate surrender. After them, Kiran shouted, "The Sultan wants them alive." They broke through the first line of soldiers, but the path ahead narrowed further, with sheer drops on either side. More imperial innocers appeared, closing the trap. Farid drew the moonstone blade, gifted by the tribe, its metal gleaming with inner light as he deflected the thrust of an imperial spear. Jabbar fought with equal ferocity, using his massive size to push soldiers dangerously close to the precipice. For a brief moment, victory seemed possible, until a net of weighted chains shot from a mechanical launcher, entangling Jabbar's legs. The great camel stumbled, fighting to maintain balance on the narrow ledge. Farid slashed at the chains with his blade, but more nets followed, pinning them both. "Enough," called an authoritative voice. The soldiers parted to reveal a man whose ornate armor and bejeweled headdress marked him as a high-ranking imperial commander. "The Sultan wants no damage to his prizes. Secure them properly." As soldiers approached with specialized restraints, Jabbar made one final desperate effort. With a mighty heave, he broke partially free of the nets and reared up, creating enough space for Farid to slip from his saddle. "Go." The command came not as words but as pure intention through their bond. "Find the Crescent Peak." "I will find you. I won't leave you," Farid protested, still slashing at the chains. "You must. The prophecy is bigger than either of us." In that moment of connection, Farid understood. The prophecy had always spoken of temporary separation before final triumph. With a cry of anguish, he ducked beneath the soldier's grasp and leapt from the ledge to a narrow outcropping 6 feet below, a gap too small for armored men to follow quickly. "Stop him!" the commander bellowed. Arrows rained down as Farid scrambled along the treacherous path, the star crystal clutched in one hand, his moonstone blade in the other. Behind him he heard Jabba's roar of defiance as the soldiers finally subdued the massive camel. Through their bond, weakening with distance, came one final message: east to the crescent. "I will endure. We will reunite." Then the connection dimmed as Farid rounded a bend in the mountain, his heart torn between escape and the desperate need to rescue his guardian and friend. The Imperial caravan wound its way down from the mountains, a procession of power and wealth snaking across the desert. At its center, transported in a massive wheeled cage reinforced with glittering metal bands, Jabba stood in sullen defiance. Imperial handlers kept their distance, wary of the camel's unpredictable strength and obvious intelligence. 3 days of descent brought them to the edges of the glass desert, where the Sultan's main forces awaited. Thousands of soldiers, support staff and slaves had established a temporary city of tents and pavilions. At its heart rose an elaborate mobile palace, a marvel of engineering that allowed the Sultan to travel with all the comforts of his capital. The commander who had captured Jabba approached the cage. "You'll soon meet your new master, beast. I suggest cooperation. The Sultan's methods of breaking resistance are creative." Jabba merely stared back, his amber eyes revealing nothing. Since separation from Farid, he had withdrawn into himself, conserving strength and maintaining the faintest thread of their bond across the growing distance. The commander frowned at the lack of response. "Bring it to the royal pavilion, and double the guard. This is no ordinary camel." Transported to the center of the camp, Jabba found himself presented to Sultan for the first time. The ruler of the Desert Kingdom sat upon a portable throne of gold and ivory, his obese form draped in silks and jewels. Despite the ostentatious display, his eyes were shrewd and calculating beneath heavy lids. "So this is one half of the prophecy," the Sultan mused, studying Jabba. "Impressive, certainly, but ultimately just an animal." He gestured to a robed figure standing in the shadows, a thin, austere man whose hands constantly moved as if weaving invisible threads. "What do you sense, Vizier?" The man stepped forward, extending bony fingers toward Jabba, without quite touching him. "Powerful magic, divine one, ancient and deep. The birthmark is a conduit for energies beyond ordinary comprehension. Can it be extracted, transferred? Not without destroying the vessel, Great One. The magic is bound to the creature's life force." The Sultan stroked his bejeweled beard. "Then we use it as bait. The boy will come for his pet, and when he does, we'll have both halves of the key." He turned to his commander. "Prepare for immediate return to the capital. I want this creature secured in the palace vaults before anyone gets ideas about rescuing it. And the slave search parties, magnificence, double them. Scour every cave, every crevice of these mountains. The boy cannot have gone far." But Farid had indeed gone far. After his desperate escape, he had followed the thread of connections. Jabbar as long as possible, tracking the Imperial caravan's direction. When the bond grew too faint to follow, he consulted the moonlight map under the quarter moon, finding a hidden path that led east, then south, a longer route to the capital that avoided Imperial roads. 14 grueling days later, Farid stood on a ridge overlooking the fabled city of Alamut, the Sultan's capital. Unlike Marrakech's mud-brick simplicity, Alamut was a fantasy of gleaming domes, towering minarets, and cascading fountains, a deliberate display of water wealth in a parched land. At the city's heart rose the Sultan's palace, its golden domes catching the sunset like captured fire. Somewhere within those walls Jabbar awaited. Their connection, though stretched painfully thin, confirmed his guardian still lived. "I'm coming, my friend," Farid whispered. Entering the city proved surprisingly simple. Thousands of visitors and laborers flowed through the gates daily. Disguised in humble clothing purchased from a mountain herder, Farid became just another face in the crowd. The palace, however, presented a different challenge. Its massive walls stood 40 feet high, patrolled by elite guards. No one entered without extensive scrutiny. For 3 days, Farid observed the palace operations from different vantage points. He noted guard rotations, delivery schedules, and waste disposal routines. On the 4th day, he spotted his opportunity, a merchant caravan delivering exotic goods for an upcoming celebration. Offering his services as a temporary laborer, Farid helped load ornate cages containing rare birds and animals destined for the Sultan's menagerie. When guards inspected the shipment at the palace gates, he kept his head down, just another anonymous worker. Once inside, he slipped away during the unloading confusion, finding refuge in the vast palace gardens. As night fell, he moved deeper into the complex, following the weakening thread of his connection with Jabbar. It led him downward, beneath the main palace structures, to heavily guarded doors that could only be the entrance to the fabled imperial vaults. 2 guards stood watch, their ceremonial armor concealing deadly weapons. Retreat and reconsideration seemed wise, until a commotion from a nearby corridor provided unexpected opportunity. A group of richly dressed officials hurried toward the vault entrance, led by the same thin-robed figure Farid had glimpsed through Jabbar's eyes, the Sultan's vizier. "Open the vault," the vizier commanded. "The Sultan wishes to attempt the ritual tonight." As the massive doors swung open, Farid glimpsed what lay beyond. Not merely a treasury, but a vast underground complex. At its center stood a structure that stole his breath. A perfect crystal cage, its transparent walls etched with symbols of containment and control. Within it, Jabbar stood motionless, his proud head bowed. Farid's birthmark burned at the sight. Through their renewed proximity, Jabbar sensed him instantly, head rising in alert attention. "The beast stirs," observed the vizier. "Something disturbs it." Farid retreated into shadows as guards moved to investigate, but his mind raced with newfound determination. The palace held more than just his captured friend. In the brief glimpse of the vault, he had seen other prisoners in smaller crystal enclosures. Some appeared human, others not quite, but all bore variations of the crescent mark. The Sultan wasn't merely hunting him and Jabbar, he was collecting everyone and everything connected to the ancient prophecy. Dawn fell to Farid hiding in the servants' quarters of the palace, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. After narrowly avoiding capture the previous night, he had taken refuge in the sprawling warren, where hundreds of workers lived to maintain the Sultan's opulent lifestyle. Here, amid the empire's lowest caste, Farid discovered unexpected allies. Whispers spread quickly of a stranger bearing the crescent mark, the symbol that had become synonymous with resistance across the desert kingdoms. "The prophecy walks among us," an elderly kitchen worker murmured, offering Farid fresh bread and a place to hide. "My grandson fights with the desert rebellion. They say the marked one will end the Sultan's tyranny." "I'm just trying to free my friend," Farid replied, uncomfortable with the reverence in the old man's eyes. "Perhaps, but prophecies work in ways beyond our understanding." From these servants, Farid learned crucial information. The Sultan planned a grand ritual 3 nights hence during the full moon. Something involving Jabbar, the other marked prisoners, and an ancient artifact called the Eternal Chalice, said to grant immortality when filled with water from the lost oasis. "He's been obsessed with finding the oasis for decades," explained a young woman who cleaned the royal libraries. "The court historians say he discovered texts suggesting the combined power of all marked ones could reveal its location. More disturbing were rumors that the ritual would drain the life force from the captives. The Sultan cared nothing for the prophecy's promise of water for all. He sought only personal gain and extended rule. As Farid formulated a rescue plan, An unexpected message arrived through the servants' network. A rebel group had infiltrated the palace staff and sought to make contact. That night, in the steam-filled foulings of the massive palace laundry, Farid met their leader, a face he recognized with shock. "Nadia," he exclaimed, remembering the scarred rebel commander from the Mirage markets. She smiled grimly. "We meet again, chosen right. Though you seem to have misplaced your guardian, the Sultan holds Jabba in a crystal cage. I need to free him before the full moon ritual. We know, that's why we're here." Nadia introduced her team, a dozen men and women disguised as palace workers, all hardened fighters of the Desert Rebellion. "But we're not just here for the Cammel. The Sultan's tyranny ends now." Their plan was audacious. Using the palace's vast underground waterways, the hidden infrastructure that supplied countless fountains and pools, they would infiltrate the vaults from below. Meanwhile, rebel forces outside the city waited for a signal to begin a coordinated attack on multiple Imperial targets. "The birthmark has become our banner," Nadia explained, unfurling a cloth bearing the crescent symbol. "Every tribe, every village suffering under the Sultan's water taxes has rallied to it. They only await a sign." Farid felt the weight of expectation pressing upon him. "I'm not a revolutionary. I just want to find the lost oasis and fulfill the prophecy." "That is the revolution," Nadia replied. "Water freely available to all would destroy the foundation of the Sultan's power." For 2 days, they prepared in secret. Farid's connection with Jabba strengthened as the full moon approached, allowing brief mental communications. Through these precious links, he learned more about the other captives, scholars, mystics, and tribal leaders who had supported the prophecy, all bearing variations of the crescent mark. Some had been missing for years. On the 3rd day, as sunset approached, their moment came. A controlled fire in the eastern wing of the palace created the necessary distraction. As guards rushed to respond, Nadia's team moved through the servant passages toward the waterway access point. Dressed in stolen guard uniforms, they descended into the dank tunnels beneath the palace. The air grew thick with moisture as they followed the main channel toward the vault foundations. The ancients built these waterways centuries before the Sultan's line, Nadia explained. His ancestors merely expanded what they found and claimed it as their own achievement. After navigating a labyrinth of passages, they located a maintenance shaft directly beneath the vault floor. 2 rebels with mining experience quickly worked to widen a small existing crack in the ancient stonework. "Once we're through, we'll have minutes at most before guards respond," Nadia warned. "We free the Cammel and the other prisoners, then signal the main force outside the city." As the opening widened enough for passage, Farid felt Jabbar's presence surge through their connection. The Cammel had sensed his approach and was preparing himself for whatever came next. "Ready?" Nadia asked, checking her weapons one final time. Farid nodded, gripping the moonstone blade gifted by the Moon Tribe. "More than ready." They emerged into the dim vault like shadows, quickly orienting themselves amid the wealth of ages. Beyond mountains of gold and jewels stood the crystal enclosures containing the prisoners. At the center, Jabbar's massive cage gleamed in the light of specially designed perpetual flames. Guards reacted almost immediately, but the rebels moved with practiced efficiency. While Nadia's fighters engaged the sentries, Farid raced toward Jabbar's cage, searching for a mechanism to open it. "There is no lock," came a voice from nearby. An elderly man in a smaller crystal cell gestured weakly. "The cages respond only to the Sultan's blood, or the Vizier's magic." Farid pressed his hand against the crystal surface, his birthmark flaring with blue light upon contact. Jabbar pressed his muzzle to the same spot from within, his own mark glowing in response. The crystal between them began to vibrate, then crack. Thin fissures spread across the surface like a spiderweb catching moonlight. "Impossible," gasped the elderly prisoner. With a sound like breaking ice, Jabbar's cage shattered. The massive Cammel stepped forward, pressing his forehead against Farid's in joyful reunion. Their combined birthmarks cast the vault in brilliant blue radiance. "The signal," Nadia shouted, as rebels quickly worked to free the other prisoners. "Light the beacon." One of her team shot a specially prepared arrow through a high ventilation shaft. It burst into blue flame upon reaching the open air, a signal visible across the entire city. Outside the palace walls, the desert rebellion erupted into coordinated action. Chaos engulfed the Golden Palace, as alarm bells rang throughout the complex. The freed prisoners, 16 men and women bearing variations of the crescent mark, gathered around Farid and Jabbar in the vault chamber. "The prophecy assembles," whispered an elderly woman whose facial markings identified her as a tribal seer from the Far Eastern deserts. "Not in generations have so many marked ones stood together." Nadia urged haste. "We must move now. The main gate should be under attack, drawing guards away from the inner passages." As they emerged from the vault into the wider palace, evidence of the rebellion's coordinated assault was everywhere. Servants had turned against their masters, barricading corridors and freeing fellow workers. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed across the city. "To the eastern courtyard," Nadia directed. "Our forces will secure an escape route there." They moved as a group through the labyrinthine palace, Jabbar's imposing presence clearing their path whenever they encountered resistance. The Cammel's strength had somehow increased during captivity, as if proximity to other marked ones had amplified his abilities. In the Grand Atrium, they encountered their first major obstacle, a unit of the Sultan's elite guard, armed with crystalline weapons that pulsed with unnatural energy. "Imperial Arcane Guard," one of the freed scholars warned. "Their weapons drain life force." The rebels engaged in fierce combat, but the specialized guards proved formidable opponents. 3 rebels fell to the crystal weapons, their bodies withering unnaturally upon contact. The tide turned when the freed prisoners revealed abilities of their own. The tribal seer summoned winds within the confined space, throwing guards against marble columns. A quiet man with a crescent mark on his palm projected illusions that confused and disoriented their attackers. Farid fought alongside them, his moonstone blade gleaming as it parried the crystal weapons. Through his enhanced connection with Jabbar, he sensed danger moments before it materialized, giving him an almost supernatural reaction time. They had nearly reached the eastern courtyard when the air before them shimmered, revealing the Sultan's vizier. His thin form seemed to flicker between corporeality and something else, as if he existed partially in another realm. "The marked ones will not leave," he stated, voice resonating unnaturally. "The ritual requires completion." With a gesture, he summoned shimmering barriers across all exits. Another motion sent invisible force slamming into the rebels, scattering them across the polished floor. Only Farid and Jabbar remained standing, their combined resistance somehow deflecting the vizier's magic. "Interesting," the vizier observed. "Your connection is more developed than our studies suggested." He produced an ornate flute carved from bone, raising it to his lips. The melody that emerged seemed to distort the very air, creating visible ripples of force directed at Farid and Jabbar. Pain lanced through Farid's mind as the music attempted to sever their bond. Jabbar roared in defiance, the sound echoing with unexpected power through the palace halls. In that moment of crisis, the elderly tribal seer crawled forward despite her injuries. "The wind flute," she gasped. "It must be destroyed or turned against him." The vizier's melody intensified, forcing Farid to his knees. Through blurring vision, he saw the seer press something into Nadia's hand. A simple wooden flute, weathered and ancient. The counter-melody the seer whispered before collapsing. "Only one of the marked can play it." Nadia rushed to Farid, thrusting the instrument into his hands. "Play." "I don't know how," he protested through gritted teeth. "Your birthmark does," she insisted. "Trust it." Desperate, Farid raised the flute to his lips. His fingers found positions he had never learned, and breath flowed through the instrument, as if guided by ancient memory. The melody that emerged was both counterpoint and complement to the vizier's tune. Simple, where his was complex, warmth against his cold precision. The vizier faltered, surprise evident on his gaunt face. Impossible. The song of wind calling was lost centuries ago. As Farid continued playing, Jabbar added his voice, a rhythmic rumbling that somehow harmonized with the flute. The other marked prisoners joined, creating a chorus that seemed to resonate with the palace itself, vibrating through stone and crystal. Outside, the sky darkened unnaturally. Through the courtyard's open ceiling, Farid glimpsed swirling clouds forming with impossible speed. Wind howled through the palace corridors, growing stronger with each note of his melody. The vizier's barriers shattered as window panes exploded inward. His skeletal form was lifted from the ground, suspended helplessly as the magical windstorm intensified. "What have you done?" he shrieked over the roaring tempest. The tribal seer, reviving slightly, smiled through bloody lips. "He has called the sandstorm of souls, the desert's oldest defense against those who would enslave its magic." Sand poured through every opening, swirling in complex patterns that somehow avoided Farid, Jabbar, and their allies, while scouring their enemies with painful precision. Palace guards fled in terror as the supernatural storm grew to engulf the entire complex. From the courtyard came the sound of horns rebel forces had broken through. Nadia urged them forward as the storm provided perfect cover for their escape. The Sultan, Farid suddenly realized. "Where is he?" "The ritual chamber beneath the eastern tower," answered one of the freed scholars. "He would not abandon the eternal chalice, not when he was so close to achieving immortality." Farid exchanged a meaningful look with Jabbar. Their connection hummed with shared purpose. "Go with the others," he told Nadia. "Get the marked ones to safety." "What are you planning?" she demanded. "To end this," Farid replied, the wind flute still warm in his hands. "The prophecy must be completed, or the Sultan will only rebuild his power." Against Nadia's protests, Farid and Jabbar turned toward the eastern tower, the supernatural sandstorm parting before them like a curtain acknowledging its masters. The eastern tower loomed through swirling sands, its golden dome now tarnished by the supernatural storm. Farid and Jabbar moved as one being, their birthmarks pulsing in synchronized rhythm. Behind them the palace burned as the rebellion seized control of its outer sections. Ahead lay the heart of the Sultan's power. The ritual chamber, where he had planned to harness the marked one's energy for his own immortality. 2 imperial arcane guards flanked the tower entrance, their crystal weapons raised against the approaching sandstorm. When they spotted Farid and Jabbar emerging from the tempest, they attacked without hesitation. Farid blocked the first guard's strike with his moonstone blade, the metals meeting with a shower of blue sparks. Jabbar charged the second guard, massive shoulder connecting with enough force to shatter ribs through armor. More guards waited inside the tower, but the fighting skills Farid had learned among the Moon tribe served him well. His movements flowed like water across stone, each strike precise and economical. Jabbar fought with equal efficiency, his powerful kicks clearing entire hallways of opposition. They descended a spiraling staircase deep beneath the tower, the air growing thick with incense and strange energies. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with amber light, inscribed with symbols similar to those Farid had seen in the ancient temple. "He's recreating the original magic," Farid realized, perverting it for his own use. The staircase opened into a vast circular chamber whose high ceiling was painted to resemble the night sky. At its center stood the Sultan upon a raised dais, his corpulent form draped in ceremonial robes embedded with glittering crystal. Before him, on an alabaster pedestal, rested an object of breathtaking beauty, a chalice carved from a single massive diamond, its surface etched with the same crescent symbol they carried. "The eternal chalice," the Sultan announced, seemingly unsurprised by their arrival. "The vessel meant to hold water from the lost oasis. I wondered if you would find your way here, chosen rider." He gestured lazily, and hidden guards emerged from alcoves around the chamber, at least 20 elite soldiers with weapons trained on the intruder. Your rebellion is impressive, but ultimately futile, the Sultan continued. Did you think I hadn't prepared for resistance? Even now my reserve armies march from the southern provinces. By dawn, order will be restored, and examples will be made of those who dared rise against me. Despite the danger, Farid stepped forward. The prophecy doesn't belong to you. The lost oasis isn't meant for one man's immortality, but for all people of the desert. The Sultan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Such naivety. Power exists to be claimed by those strong enough to wield it. My ancestors understood this when they first began controlling the desert's water. I simply perfect their vision. From within his robes, he produced an object that made Farid's blood run cold. A scepter, topped with a crystal in the exact shape of the crescent birthmark. My vizier spent decades creating this, the Sultan explained, caressing the scepter lovingly. It contains essence extracted from dozens of lesser marked ones we found over the years. Not enough for the complete ritual, but sufficient to control the elements temporarily. He raised the scepter, and its crystal pulsed with sickly yellow light. Immediately the sandstorm outside intensified, but now turned against the rebel forces, hampering their advance through the palace. Jabbar growled, sensing the perverted magic that mimicked their birthright. Through their connection, Farid felt the Cammel's outrage at this corruption of sacred power. You've enslaved and killed innocents for your ambition, Farid said, struggling to maintain composure. The desert itself rejects you. The desert obeys whoever controls its water, the Sultan countered. As for innocence, he gestured dismissively, sacrifices are necessary for greatness. With a sudden motion, he pointed the scepter directly at them. Crackling energy erupted from its tip, aiming to ensnare them as it had the previous marked ones. But something unexpected happened. When the energy touched their glowing birthmarks, it rebounded, shattering several of the crystal-bearing guards nearby. The Sultan's confident expression faltered. Impossible. Farid raised the wind flute to his lips, playing the ancient melody with growing confidence. Jabbar added his voice, the harmonics somehow enhancing the flute's power. The chamber's air began to spin, forming a localized whirlwind that deflected the guards' arrows and disrupted the Sultan's magic. Kill them, the Sultan shrieked, genuine fear creeping into his voice. The battle erupted in full force. Guards attacked from all sides, while Farid and Jabbar fought back to back. The Sultan continued channeling power through his scepter, but each spell seemed weaker than the last, as if the corrupted artifact was consuming his own energy to function. Through the tower's high windows came an unexpected sight: rebel fighters mounted on camels, somehow riding the magical sandstorm itself. The tribal forces that had gathered outside the city had arrived, using Farid's windstorm as their pathway into the palace. Sal led by Nedia and the freed marked ones, these desert warriors poured into the ritual chamber, overwhelming the remaining guards with their ferocity and superior numbers. The Sultan, seeing his forces crumbling, backed toward a hidden exit behind the dais. This changes nothing. I still possess the chalice and the knowledge to find the lost oasis. No, came a voice from the stairwell. The ancient tribal seer entered, supported by two younger marked ones. You possess only corruption and greed. With surprising speed for one so frail, she flung a small object toward the Sultan, a stone that glowed with the same blue light as the birthmarks. When it struck the scepter, both objects flared blindingly. The Sultan screamed as the scepter's crystal cracked, releasing the trapped energies it contained. Yellow and blue light warred around him, lifting his massive form from the ground. "What have you done to me?" he howled, as his body began to wither, the scepter draining his life force just as it had done to its previous victims. "The balance restores itself," the seer replied calmly. "The desert reclaims what was stolen." Within moments, the once mighty Sultan collapsed, not dead, but aged and withered beyond recognition. The corrupting scepter turned to dust beside him. Dawn broke over Alamet, painting the smoke-filled sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The palace still smoldered in places, but the fighting had largely subsided. Throughout the city, imperial forces surrendered as news of the Sultan's defeat spread like wildfire. In the courtyard of the Eastern Tower, tribal leaders and rebel commanders gathered around Farid and Jabbar. The eternal chalice, rescued from the ritual chamber, gleamed in the morning light as it rested on a simple wooden table. "The Sultan's line is broken," Nadia announced. "His son has fled to the southern provinces, and his generals have laid down their weapons. What happens now?" Farid asked, suddenly aware that toppling a tyrant was simpler than building what came after. The tribal seer, looking stronger after the night's rest, gestured toward the assembled leaders. "Representatives from all desert peoples will form a council to govern until permanent structures can be established. Water rights will be distributed equally. But first," she continued, fixing Farid with her penetrating gaze, "the prophecy must be complete. The lost oasis must be found to restore the desert's balance." The assembled marked ones, now numbering 23 with those who had emerged from hiding during the night, formed a circle around Farid and Jabbar. Each bore some variation of the crescent symbol, though none as pronounced as theirs. "Together we can locate what has been hidden," the seer explained. "The birthmarks are not just symbols but keys, each holding a fragment of the ancient knowledge." At her direction they joined hands, forming an unbroken circle with Farid, Jabbar, and the eternal chalice at its center. The ritual required no complex incantations or elaborate magic, simply their combined intention and the power of their shared markings. As their birthmarks began to glow in unison, Farid felt knowledge flowing into his mind. Images of landmarks, star positions, and hidden pathways. Most importantly, he saw the crescent mountain from a new perspective, revealing a concealed valley behind its curved peak. When the vision faded, he found himself kneeling beside Jabbar, one hand clutching the wind flute, the other resting on the eternal chalice. "I know the way," he announced, his voice steady with newfound certainty. 3 days later, a remarkable caravan departed Alamut. Representatives from every desert tribe, guided by the marked ones, journeyed toward the mountains of the moon. Former enemies traveled side by side, nomads and city dwellers, scholars and warriors, all united by the promise of water for a parched land. Farid and Jabbar led them, the eternal chalice carefully packed in ceremonial wrappings. The tribal seer rode beside them, sharing ancient stories of the time before the great drought, when the desert had bloomed with life. "The oasis was sealed to protect it from corruption," she explained. "The guardians foresaw that power would corrupt those who controlled water, so they hid the greatest source until worthy keepers could be found. Their journey took them through territories that had seen no travelers in generations, forgotten valleys, ancient riverbeds long dry, and finally the hidden passes of the Crescent Mountain that Farid had glimpsed in his vision. As they approached the mountain's curved peak, Farid felt Jabbar grow increasingly alert, the camel's senses attuned to subtle changes in the air. There was moisture here, not on the surface but deep beneath the rock. "This is the place," he announced, dismounting at the base of a sheer cliff face that perfectly matched the crescent shape of their birthmarks. The assembled travelers watched in reverent silence as Farid and Jabbar approached the stone wall. No visible entrance marred its surface, yet both felt an unmistakable pull toward a specific section where the rock seemed to shimmer slightly in the afternoon light. Farid placed his hand against the stone, his birthmark glowing blue upon contact. Jabbar pressed his muzzle to the same spot, his own mark illuminating in response. Nothing happened. "The prophecy speaks of both marks forming one key," the seer reminded him. "Not two separate keys, but halves of a whole." Understanding dawned on Farid. He traced the outline of his birthmark on the stone, then guided Jabbar to position his mark directly opposite, forming a complete circle from their two crescents. The stone beneath their touch softened like wax, the matching crescents merging to create a perfect circle that began to rotate of its own accord. A grinding sound echoed through the mountain, as the cliff face split down the middle, revealing a narrow passage bathed in ethereal blue light. Cool, moist air wafted from the opening, the first breath of a living paradise long sealed from the world. The guardian key activates, the seer whispered in awe. After 500 years, the way is open. Farid and Jabbar led the procession into the passage, which widened as they progressed deeper into the mountain. The walls were lined with the same luminous stone as the Moon Tribe village, casting everything in soft blue radiance. The tunnel curved gently downward for nearly a mile before opening suddenly onto a sight that stole the breath of every traveler. A vast circular valley nestled within the mountain's hollow interior, completely hidden from the outside world. Lush vegetation in 100 shades of green covered terraced slopes, descending to a central lake of crystalline blue water. Flowering trees heavy with fruit lined paths of white stone. Waterfalls cascaded from underground springs, feeding streams that irrigated every section of the hidden paradise. The lost oasis, Farid breathed, feeling Jabbar's equal wonder through their connection. At the valley's center, rising from an island in the middle of the lake, stood a structure of incredible beauty, a temple of white marble and crystal, its spires reaching toward an opening in the mountain peak that allowed sunlight to flood the enclosed world. As the travelers stood transfixed by the wonder before them, the tribal seer spoke softly, "We have found it. Now we must learn to be worthy of it." 1 year passed since the opening of the lost oasis, a year of profound transformation across the desert kingdoms. What began as a hidden paradise soon spawned a network of life-giving change throughout the parched lands. Underground springs, dormant for centuries, reawakened as if responding to the oasis's rebirth. Rivers long dry began to flow again, bringing water to regions that had known only drought within living memory. The desert itself seemed to exhale in relief, patches of green emerging in places where nothing had grown for generations. At the heart of this renewal stood the Council of Waters, representatives from every tribe and city who gathered in the marble temple at the oasis center. There, beneath the Tree of Visions, an ancient luminous growth whose branches displayed images of past and future when touched by those with the birthmark. They forged new agreements for sharing the desert's most precious resource. Farid, once a nameless slave, now sat as first guardian, his voice carrying equal weight to tribal chiefs who could trace their lineage back thousands of years. Beside him always was Jabbar, whose intelligence and wisdom had become legendary among the desert peoples. The eastern villages report their wells rising by another foot this month, announced a weathered nomad chief during the council's monthly gathering. The children there swim in natural pools their grandparents never knew existed. "The renewal spreads faster than we anticipated," observed the tribal seer, her ancient face creased in a rare smile. "The land remembers its true nature." After the council adjourned, Farid wandered the terraced gardens with Jabbar, their bond now so complete that verbal communication had become largely unnecessary. Their thoughts flowed between them like water, enhanced by the oasis's unique energy. They paused at a high overlook where the entire hidden valley spread before them. Where once a few hundred travelers had stood in awe, now a thriving community of nearly 3,000 lived in harmony. Dwellings built from local materials blended with the landscape. Gardens flourished everywhere, producing abundant food. Children who had never known play now laughed as they splashed in clear streams. "We've come far," Farid murmured, scratching Jabbar's ear. The camel rumbled in agreement, though his thoughts carried more complex impressions. Satisfaction mingled with awareness that their work had only begun. The former sultan's son still commanded significant forces in the southern provinces, gathering support from neighboring kingdoms that feared the water-sharing philosophies spreading from the oasis. As if summoned by these thoughts, Nadia approached, her rebel commander's garb replaced by the simple robes of the Desert Guard. The protective force formed from former rebels and tribal warriors. "Scouts report movement along the southern border," she informed them. "Nothing imminent, but definitely military preparations." Farid nodded, unsurprised. The old powers won't surrender easily. We'll be ready, Nadia assured him. The Desert Guard grows stronger each day, and our allies increase as word of the water revival spreads. That evening, as moonlight filtered through the mountain's peak opening, Farid and Jabbar participated in a ceremony that had quickly become tradition, the blessing of the waters. Carrying the eternal chalice, now permanently filled with the oasis's crystal-clear water, they walked the circumference of the central lake. At each cardinal point, they were met by representatives of different desert peoples who received a symbolic sip from the chalice, renewing their commitment to protect the waters and share them justly. The ceremony concluded at the Tree of Visions, where Farid and Jabbar approached together, their birthmarks glowing softly in the moonlight. As they simultaneously touched the tree's smooth trunk, its branches illuminated with shifting images, scenes of desert lands transformed, dry plains becoming grasslands, scattered settlements growing into harmonious communities. But other visions followed, armies massing on distant borders, fearful rulers plotting to seize the water sources, the shadow of the old empire still threatening to return. The future remains unwritten, the tribal seer commented, observing from nearby. The tree shows possibilities, not certainties. Farid nodded, accepting the wisdom in her words. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but its purpose was not merely finding the oasis, it was establishing a new relationship between the people and their land, between power and responsibility. As the visions faded, leaving the tree's branches gently glowing, children from various tribes approached shyly. These youngest members of the oasis community had created a song celebrating the story of the slave and the camel who changed the desert's fate. Their clear voices rose in the night air, telling of auctions and escapes, betrayals and friendships, and ultimately, the water's return. Jabbar listened with particular attention, his expressive eyes following each child. Through their connection, Farid sensed the camel's special concern for the new generation, those who would inherit their work and carry it forward. Later, as they retired to their simple dwelling near the temple, a messenger arrived bearing news that some might consider troubling. Another child had been born with the crescent birthmark, this time in a remote western village. The fourth such birth since the oasis opened, but Farid and Jabbar exchanged a look of quiet satisfaction. The marks were appearing more frequently now, preparing guardians for the future. The desert was healing, its ancient magic reawakening, ensuring that what they had begun would continue long after they were gone. Outside their window, the stars shone down on a land being reborn, one drop of water at a time.